Steve, my man, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
I am well. We were talking off air. I like to start the podcast whenever I have a new guest on and tell my listeners, because they obviously know me, why I wanted to have you on the podcast, so they have a reason to listen. I think
I'll feel better.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Just get your ego up a little bit. Is that I think that there's just a correlation between those who are growing on social media and actually an inverse correlation between the quality of the information that they're giving out. And so there's just like a lot of people. Instagram is tough right now. Organic reach is low, all that stuff. And it has just like created an environment where people are like, oh, in order to, compete for attention, I need to say crazier and crazier shit. And you have blown up in the last, whatever, X amount of a year or so. And it's been just like, whatever, it's a really happy thing where like normally that comes through like weird, not so great practices, but you've done an amazing job. It's amazing information, really, really good job. Like a one page, it's like a good intersection of fun and education. And so you do a great job with that. And I'm super happy to see that you've grown. It's been awesome to watch.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. It means a lot. I think it's literally been since November last year. November last year, I had 5,000 followers. And now it's, I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's 767, something like that, which is, I didn't even think that was possible. I remember I was about to hit 100K and I was like, oh my God, my life has changed. Yeah. And yeah, just kept going. Crazy year.
Great. Let's do a little back, the old classic podcast. Tell us a little bit about Steve. And I'll translate all of your just like terrible accent stuff into English, like for my followers and stuff like that. So you just
makes sense.
Yeah. Tell us a little about yourself.
All right. So this is one area. If your audience, if there's many Brits, they'll get this. If there's not many Brits, they won't get this. So I'll kind of lay this out there right away. British people, British lads, don't talk about themselves very much. So this is actually, I've had to script out, so like write down little bullet points of where I'm going to talk about, what I'm going to talk about. Otherwise, I'll just be like, PT, here I am. That's it. It's the end of the story. So household-wise, growing up, single-parent household. That got me into, when I was younger, my dad. So dad brought us up, got us into football. So I played football, which is soccer to you guys.
I'm a massive Arsenal fan, so it's like a freak big Arsenal fan. So I don't know if whatever where you're from, depending on where you're from, that's like a plus or a minus. But I played soccer, football, whatever, and big Arsenal fan. So yeah, awesome.
Good man. We're literally like just down the road from London.
Fuck yeah.
So played football, played up to like it's like a professional standard, but at the age of sort of like till the age of 15, 16. So I played for Charlton and then Gillingham. So it was up to a high level. But let's say parent-wise, very pushy father with very high standards and not a very good relationship. So as soon as I was old enough, stopped doing that. But it probably installed some things into me that actually have worked in a roundabout way quite well for social media, which was you have to be entertaining to get attention. Like you have to be doing something worthy of attention. So that kind of like installed that kind of thought process into me. It's only something now that we're starting to unravel as you kind of like delve into like deeper things as you get to the age of 32 and that sort of thing. But as soon as I finished football, I went into college. I only went to the college that I went to because it was an all-girls college and I was a 16-year-old lad. So it was an all-girls school. I was a 16-year-old lad. So I didn't go there for educational reasons. I literally just went there because that was where my mindset went at the time. Obviously, that didn't work out at all because I just spent the whole time getting drunk and being hungover. Then I went to catering college. Actually passed that, did quite well there. But in the last year of catering college, I was told that you get paid terrible for this job and you just get showered at most of the time. So why do you want to do this job? And I sat there and thought, why do I want to do this job? Didn't end up doing that in the end. Went back to working in the co-op, which I was working at this whole time anyway, which the co-op is essentially like a local corner store. It's like a chain of corner stores around where we are. So stayed working there. Didn't leave there till I was about 20, must have been about 21, 22. I'm not sure on the exact dates, but transitioned from there to working for a railway station for about 3 months until I realized the kids laughing on the opposite platform was because the uniform that I was wearing was way too large whilst I was sweeping up leaves off this platform. I thought this is a terrible job. And in amongst all this, I'd already qualified as a PT. So then that was where I literally was like, look, why am I doing all of these things rather than just doing the thing that I enjoy, I care about, like that I feel like I should be doing. And I think it's important sometimes to paint that pictures, because one of the things that I see in the fitness industry, it seems like everybody has this kind of like perfect entry into fitness and have this like very well constructed life, and it just kind of feeds its way into them doing very well in the fitness space. It's not always the case. Some of us are just like random little delinquents that have kind of stumbled across doing fairly well for ourselves. So that all happened when I came into fitness. I was quite lucky that some of the people that, and again, I think a lot of this stuff is quite lucky, like it's just a bit of luck, because I was exposed to people online like Eric Helms, Matt Ogus. I think I was exposed to Eric Helms through Matt Ogus, Lane Norton, who was probably like in a roundabout way through those guys as well. So the first bit of information that I was taking in, rather than it, and the thing that kind of cemented itself into my brain, rather than it being these random bro bodybuilders, which it very easily could have been, and then that would have been my worldview. I was lucky enough that it was all these people that were very respectable, had very good information. So that kind of like laid a really nice foundation. So I went into PT and was doing quite well as a in-person PT, doing mostly like physique change kind of stuff, which is pretty much kind of where my space is at the moment. But in amongst that time, I actually like transitioned away from it a little bit, because again, I think a little bit of you get caught up into what's going to make me do better, like what's going to help me reach out to more people and kind of like get more attention. And for a little while, I almost kind of like retreated back into a very kind of self-helpy space, which I don't think there's anything wrong with, but it's just not fucking me at all. Like I was writing a lot of Instagram quotes on Twitter, and again, nothing wrong with doing that. There's some people that do it amazingly well. Like Andrew Coates was my mentor. He does it fantastically. He does not do it at all like I was doing it. I was doing it like the jokey thing that I put up this morning on my story, where like, there's two wolves that live within you, like those kind of things, those cliche kind of ways of doing it. So I was doing it like that, and I realized this is nothing like me at all. It took me like a good year to learn that. And then I transitioned away from that. And then that was when I did a social media course and had a business mentor who I still have now. And one of the first things they said to me, and it took a little while for this to kind of drum itself into me, but one of the first things they said was like, if you go back and watch your content, would you be interested in it? Like, would you watch it? And I was like, no, like, I fucking wouldn't watch it. And they were like, yeah, because it's boring. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. The information's good. Like, nothing's changed in terms of what I'm saying over the years, but the way you're delivering it's boring. And then that's where I was thinking, and we were just saying off air, like there is a gap that can be bridged between the people that are getting really big but for shit information, but it's because they're doing it in such an entertaining way, versus the people that aren't getting big even though they're delivering great information. There is a gap there, and that's what I'm trying to like come in and feel is like there's a certain sector of people that feel like they aren't getting enough information because it's just not being wrapped up in the right way for them. And then here we are.
Yeah, and there was a time, I don't know how long you've been posting consistently on social media, but there was a time where it didn't require as much entertainment along the way. Like there was always like, hey, your content's got to be educational or funny or entertaining or in depth, or it's, but it's becoming an and, not an or. It's becoming like, you can't, and that, whatever. And there's no like being crying over it over the years of like, well, it's funny. I just reposted a super old like infographic, something this morning. Just I'm actually just whatever. That's me experimenting. I'm like, I wonder like if that content can make a comeback, but whatever. Maybe that's just like hanging on to the old days. But it is certainly at a place where like if you're trying to grow on social media, everybody. I run a mentorship with some coaches, and I'm like, all of you guys know the same shit as Steve or the same shit as other people that are growing fast. It's like we need to spend more time figuring out a way to do it in a way that's entertaining and start to acknowledge that it's like the days of the Jordan Syatt Carter Good infographic where it's like very simple, like here's calorie cycling with like some lettuce emojis and a pizza emoji. It's like, that's no longer going to cut it. And we need to not be someone else. Like I know you are, I bet very much who you are on social media, and sure you are intentional about the way you post and all of that. But, yeah, we have to spend a little bit more of that extra energy to be entertaining and to get people to want to watch, because we're fighting against people who are saying just like the person who's saying that, like, whatever, aspartame or some shit's going to kill you. Like that in and of itself is enthralling. And here you are like, eat protein and don't eat too many calories. You really got to dress that up, and it's got to be a little bit more entertaining for sure.
I think as well, like especially for other PTs, like sometimes it seems like PTs will look down on delivering information in a certain way, despite what the information is, but because it's delivered in a certain way. But then you have to go back to, well, what's the purpose of delivering the information? Like, if the purpose of delivering the information is to help someone, then you deliver it in whatever way that actually makes sense to you, but in a way that helps someone. The same way, if you was in a gym with that client and you were telling them about the moment arm versus the lever lengths into this push up, and that's why you're going outside of your active range with this and that. And you're like, well, yeah, for sure. For some clients, that'll work and that'll be brilliant. But for most of the clients you work with, they're general population people, and you're going to have to say something more interesting. So you break it down in a way that makes sense to them. Social media is the same fucking thing. You're just breaking it down in a way that makes sense to people, like that's easy. And again, like the only difference really that I come in with, that I think personally, is that I'm not scared to address the fact that you are a fitness person, yes, but at some point in your life, you've probably done some drugs and you've probably drunk some alcohol and you've probably sworn at people and you've probably done this and you've had sex, and it's okay. You can fucking joke about those things, because if you was in the pub with your mates, you'd have a laugh about it. So why can't you have a laugh about it on social media? And sure, some people don't like to hear it, but there's also 767,000 people that are like, yeah, great. I understand what you're saying. It makes sense.
I find one of the, like, I don't know if it's interesting or depressing, or I don't know what exact adjective I'd use here, but is like, if I browse people's comment sections, like, when you have a big following, you might have, the 762,000 people that are following you, there's a percentage of people that are going to follow you because they love you, and a percentage of people that follow you because they hate you, does your comment section ever get crazy? Do you ever is it ever actually something where you're like, I can't believe these people exist?
Do you know what? I'm really, really fortunate, because again, like, my whole thing's just like banter. I'm gonna have banter with this thing. Yeah. Like, fitness should be more fun than it is. I don't understand why it isn't. And obviously for me, I think some people are really good with that. Like Jordan Sykes really good with that. But he didn't really occupy like the muscle growth physique change space, even like kind of on the fringes, but not really. And like, I know that I'm a little bit more this way. And nobody does that in this, because everyone takes it so fucking seriously. You're like, which I get, because a lot of people are bodybuilders. But a lot of the people you're working with ain't bodybuilders. They're just normal people who want to have a laugh. So because my story is always banter, because everything else is always banter, it's open house for people coming and giving me banter, because I'll joke about being ginger, I'll joke about being short, I'll joke about all these things. So it's open house, like, people are like, cool, they come give me shit, we have a little bit of back and forth, it's great. So in terms of DMs, brilliant, great community, love it. In terms of posts, great comment section and you can kind of go through my videos and see this. Like, if you see a video that does, let's say, over 400,000 views, and then anywhere above that, it will turn into a cesspit, because it will go outside of your audience, the people that are like, cool, I'm watching these, I like these, I enjoy these, I get it. Might not agree with everything, but I get it. And then it will go to the outer fringes of people that are like, there was a guy the other day, and I literally did an entire post on, and this is a repost from a while ago, breaking down how much you actually have to do in the gym to see a return. So like, how low the barrier of entry is. And because I use percentages in it, his comment was like, oh, it's so annoying when people like this gatekeep fitness and make it so it's hard for people to get into. And I'll just have banter with the comments. I'm like, it's funny because I literally swear this whole video is about not doing that, you silly little Billy. And like, people come in and they're liking it and everything else. But you're like, there are just people in this world that will just take what you say and completely flip it on his head. So you can't appeal to everyone. And if you try to, you're gonna capture no one. No one's gonna care about what you're saying. So you just almost have to get rid of the idea. I don't know if you saw the comment section on the aspartame video. Have you ever go through, read that one? It's a dump fire.
Yeah, and there's a correlation there in both directions of like, those are the posts that will not just by themselves blow up, but that's a reason why they'd blow up, because they will bring in this sort of person who's going to come in and comment, and that exposure is good, and and all of the back and forth is good, and engagement is engagement. And so yeah, that I definitely see that too, where I'm like, I hate that there's a nudge towards not being edgy. You're not even edgy. What are we talking about here? You're not like saying divisive things, but unfortunately we're at a point now where like, what is divisive for the average person. The threshold is super duper low, and so everything is divisive, even the simplest form of whatever, not to get overly cynical about it, but yeah.
No, it's true. I agree, because even what's the guy's name? Paul Saladino. So he'll always get like but like he's got, how many millions followers has he got? It's a lot, isn't it?
A lot, yeah, over a million, definitely.
I want to say maybe into 2, maybe even higher than that. It's a lot of followers. So if you think there's that many people out there following a guy that says 2 million, yeah. So if you got that person out there who says vegetables, which is like one of the staples that we've always known for health, is now bad, and it's 2 million people that follow him, and he's even contradicted himself within his own content of being like vegetables are terrible, and then over time slowly progressed his way to, well, if you eat vegetables and they make you feel better, then that's fine. And you're like, well, hold on a second. that's not being your message. And all those people are still following him. You kind of have to go, well, for me anyway, the way I kind of spun it in my head was that I'm going to get the people that follow him coming in and giving me shit no matter what I do. I could give you as much proof as you like. You are not going to change your mind. So then you go, I think it's Rappaport's, is it Rappaport's rules of engagement? No, Rappaport's rules of engagement, another thing. But there's a thing within debating, which is like, if you don't both sit down at the table and you're both not open to the idea that the other person could be correct and you could be wrong. So you're not coming into this discussion with the idea that you're going to change your mind. Then you just enter into an argument. And I'm like, well, I'm not fucking arguing with strangers on the internet. So the only time I'll respond, most of the time, don't get me wrong, sometimes I give in and I get triggered. But most of the time is if I see a good bit of banter that I can have with them. So that'll be it. Because again, the way I see that is like stacking up layers to you and your personality to the people that are following you. So there was a guy on that aspartame video that was like, did you get paid by Big Coke to do this? And I was like, yeah, but they were really pissed off that I was using Pepsi. Then that comment on that like video got, I think it's on like 12,000 likes for a comment on a video. Yeah. They're like, okay, so that's 12,000 people that have come in and they're like, that's funny. Like, and then they're with you. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I'm in that situation too, where it's a combination of, do I have some fun banter that I know is just allows me to take everything a little bit lighter, or there's the occasional, like you said, it triggered whatever version of that word we mean, but like there's the occasional, like I like, I crack my knuckles and I'll like, all right, let's go. Not like in a divisive way, but almost like a let's practice. Like I see it sometimes where somebody comments on my page and I'm like, let me see if I can actually articulate, not because I care about this. I'm not going to spend 45 minutes trying to change one person's mind, but almost like if other people come, they might learn from this comment thread. And maybe it's good practice for me to be like, okay, do I actually know what I'm talking about? Do I have a defensible argument here? So I try and look at it that way, but yeah. Jordan. Yeah. Speaking of Jordan Syatt, he's been just a big influence on me. I know Jordan's changed over the years a smidge, but like killing people with kindness and just like never like actually letting them, get to you in a divisive way has been helpful for like just navigating the comment section for sure.
Oh mate, I've heard. I think Jordan Syatt was a huge influence on some of the stuff that I was doing a few years ago. And again, like he still has been in terms of the way you kind of like present yourself and present information, and it doesn't have to be super high end, even though you're talking about high end things. But then one of the things that I think, depending on what type of person you are, like, so for me, if I went into things and tried to kill people with kindness, it would seem really weird. Not because I'm a prick, like because I would just take really weird in real life.
It would seem really weird. I know you for 5 minutes, and it wouldn't sound like you, Yeah.
I'm just gonna take the piss, and like if we can both leave this afterwards, like having a little bit of a laugh, and that's why I'll call him a silly Billy. I'm never gonna call him a name. I'll be like, you're being a silly Billy, because I'm like, well, we can both have a bit of fun with that. And at the end of it, I'll be like, look, neither of us really care about this. This is just the internet. It's not that serious. Yeah. But then I suppose that's almost where you start to understand who you are and how you can respond to things without losing your shit all the time. Because there was a time, especially when things started to kick off on social media, it's got a lot better now, but when things started to kick off, that there would be such a drain from negative comments coming in. So like one of my first videos so I'd probably say that 80% of my following has come from probably a collection of anywhere between 7 and 10 videos, but I've probably posted maybe 60 or 70 in that time. But the first one that went to, I think it stopped at like 2.5 or 3 million views. That got a lot of shit on it. And I was reacting to the shit because it was my first time ever kind of experiencing it. And you forget that it's gone to the fringes of the internet, all these people that they're not your people, and you're kind of reacting to them. And it was such a drain for like a good 2-3 weeks that you just kind of learn your lesson from it. You're like, look, I've got to deal with this in a better way.
Did it hit like a bottoming out point, or like where you were just like continuing to do it and it drained you and it basically just hit rock bottom where you're like, I can't keep doing this?
I'm quite an introspective person in terms of like, I will sit down and analyze what I'm doing and be like, I need to do things in a better way, because what I'm doing right now, I know that the way I kind of see a lot of the stuff that goes on is that I know that other people are doing this, and I know that other people have been doing this for a long time, and I know that I can't be the only person that's getting this kind of shit. So if those people are doing it, there's a way that they're doing it. And it's not because they don't care about it, because I've seen the way they talk and interact on their own content and everything else. So I know they do care. So how are they managing it? And you just kind of go through this assessment in your head. It's almost like a little tick box, like, okay, having banter with it. That kind of works. Yeah, that works in these situations. You're like, okay, reacting to it. Well, that didn't fucking work at all. That was horrible. And then you're like, okay, well, maybe I'll just ignore it because it's not doing anything to me. I'm not going to turn the comments off or anything like that because, again, like you said before, every time someone comes in and comments, the video's playing in the background and you're like, well, there's another 3 or 4 views just from that one person that wanted to give you some shit. And you're like, is it still helping a bunch of people? Yes, it is. So you're like, okay, cool, leave it.
Yeah, there's the I'm browsing your stuff in the background, and I don't know if it's the growing your glutes one, but you're getting torched for not putting any females on this list here.
Yeah. It wasn't the growing your glutes one, but I got some shit for that.
It's crazy. Not that that's like not like a totally like not that there's not like, I'm sure you saw that and you were like, yeah, I don't know. I'm sure you saw that and you were like, yeah, I maybe could have done that, but I don't know. It's also not like, I don't know. Is this a moment of, should I be suggesting that? Should I be on board with that? Like, did you feel like, oh, that's a legitimate thing? Or were you like, hey, this is just the people that I've interacted with and that I can speak to their quality of information? Or, yeah.
This is the thing that it was basically what you just said. So these are the people that I know. I like their quality of information. I know female coaches, but I don't know that many female coaches, me personally, in the muscle growth space that then I would have tagged in that. So that's like the difference. I think later on I tagged another one where I tagged like Shona Virtue and stuff like that, because Shona Virtue is fabulous. She's amazing. But again, she's not like necessarily like a muscle growth coach. She was kind of trying to keep it within that spectrum of people. But then that was one of those things where on that post, again, I was like, well, and I think I did post one later and I said, look, last time I didn't post any females, got some shit for that. I was like, okay, cool. Let's update it with some females as well, because I know some of you guys want it. But that post, I could have gone back and updated the caption, but I was like, no, like this isn't how the internet works. You don't get to tell me that you're offended by something I've said. And if I don't think there's anything wrong with it because I'm telling you what my worldview on this matter is, which it is, it's just my view. Like these are people that I know. I don't have to then go through it and screen myself to go, okay, wait a minute, I should know some more people because you said I should know some different people. So I'm like, oh, fuck it, I'll just leave it. And then I'll update it at a later point.
Yeah, no, I'm cracking up, man. This is the people. This is like, and I could see that being an emotional moment of like, oh fuck, like I pissed off all these people, like I'm an asshole, think of me now, and it seems like you kind of took that and you were like, okay, like I'm not going to overcorrect and go in and adjust the caption. I'm just going to maybe have a laugh about it in my next one where I'm like, hey, you guys, maybe on some level you were right. And maybe I could have tried harder and cool. I didn't like go back in time and like fucking try and rewrite history here, but all right, cool. Here are some female coaches, like, you know, whether you or not, you were like apologizing, but just saying, okay, I learned from that moment, you know?
I think that's the difference. Like in situations like that, you don't have to apologize because you've not done anything wrong, because the message itself was, for one, by somebody saying you should have tagged female coaches, are you implying that the only time you could be talking about muscle growth in your ass is because you're a female? And you're like, well, no, you wouldn't be implying that. So, okay, cool. Are you telling me that I should have a different worldview to you and that I should think about other people? No, I shouldn't. Okay, cool. So then you're like, well, I haven't done anything wrong. If you'd like me to give you some, because some people in them comments were like, oh, could you like next time, like, let us know some female coaches because I'd love to follow them. I'm like, yeah, sure. That's great. Literally not a problem at all. That's a fabulous way of asking. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. What are like, okay, so as a content creator, there's a combination of talking about new things, talking about old things in new ways, iterating based on data from prior, like, oh, this communicative style worked. Do you feel like you have certain topics that you find yourself coming back to, feeling like, yeah, but this is where either you're super passionate about teaching or you feel people really need help with this, or this kind of the same thing sometimes?
Yeah, I like there's certain topics within. Do you know what? Actually, sometimes some of the topics that do really well, like the aspartame one. And again, I don't know whether this is because sometimes because you're so into the fitness space, you almost get removed from what is going on around you, like in the general kind of population. So I was really surprised that one like took off the way it did. It was crazy, and I didn't really understand why, because I thought it's like a fairly well-known thing that it's safe and it's okay. Like it's not even that much of a contentious issue within the nutrition space that it's safe and it's good, but it just went crazy. But then in terms of the things that you will talk about on a regular that people always seem to respond quite well to, it's just the general basics. It's like, okay, this is how you figure out how much protein you're going to need. And here's how you can figure out how to divide it up. This is how you can lay out your pre and post workout meals in terms of to get kind of like the best effect. But then the thing that I'm always trying to wrap back into that stuff is that, and I think this is what resonates with people quite well, is that if you miss that, it doesn't mean your whole day's fucked and like you've got nothing left after that. Like you're fine. Everything else is still fine. It just means you might get a little bit more of an effect. And that's cool. Like there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely see that. And there's a correlation because you're obviously someone who's actually trying to help people. So this idea of like, oh, what do I feel very passionate about talking about, kind of becomes what people really need help with. And I think that that's where your mind goes in terms of making content. I think about what are the things that people really need help with, and that's what I want to make content about. Instead of, I'm not somebody who's like overly passionate about something in my own life when it comes to fitness. I'm more passionate about like reflecting what I feel when I work with my clients.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I see that people are struggling with this and I want better for them. So let's talk about this, instead of like, I'm not a bodybuilder. I'm not a whatever. I don't have any like personal physical endeavors outside of just being healthy and being strong and all of that good stuff. And so, yeah, I tend to not, I don't know, that's where my motivation comes from making content for sure.
Your content's always reminded me a little bit of my content in terms of like you're on the fringes, like you're towards like the muscle growth space, but then like not fully invested into almost like this bodybuilder kind of like everything has to be on point. Otherwise there's no point.
I love hypertrophy training and I'm super passionate about hypertrophy training, but like I'm passionate about it in a lazy way. Like I've always been a lazy person. And so my pursuit is actually how little you can do and still see X amount of progress. And so that kind of toes the line between some of my clients and some of my people in my group, and some people follow me are actually more into hypertrophy than me. They like hypertrophy for the ambitious side of how much can they gain. And then there's other people that are like, oh, here's this thing that I can do a couple times a week for 30 to 40 minutes or 20 to 30 minutes and get great results. And so, yeah, you're definitely right. It's because when you go take the N1 courses and you go talk about hypertrophy a ton and you make that like a part of your identity, you bring with you some people who really are into it, where I'm like, well, actually I'm into it because I think it's a great way to like not get injured, get really healthy and not have to do for a ton of time. And so, like straddling those two things for sure.
It's good. It's so supportive to like everything in life, isn't it? But then people, like you were just saying, there's certain crowds within the fitness space, and not necessarily like M1 or these people, because I quite like the way that like RP, Renaissance Periodization, will go about it. Like, like Mike Isdell will have like quite a bit of a laugh when he's presenting information. You're like, oh, this is brilliant. And like even Eric Helms, like when he's doing his podcast with Omar Isoff, which I can't remember his name now, Generation Iron. But when they're doing their podcast, they just have a great laugh. You're like, this is brilliant. I love that. Like, I love the way you can kind of take in information like that. But when certain people, and I think coaches get stuck into this like trap sometimes, they're making going to the gym. One of my mentors said it, and it fucking stuck with me, because he was like, can you imagine if a plumber woke up in the morning and posted onto Instagram that lions don't concern themselves with the opinions of sheep? He's like, I'm going to work today, I'm fixing pipes, lions don't concern themselves with the opinions of sheep. But all these kind of things, and you're like, just fucking relax. Like, we are at the end of the day talking about muscle growth and like general kind of fitness, getting leaner, dropping a bit of body fat. If you're already relatively jacked to any level, you've already ticked off all the muscle growth benefits of health you're going to get. Like, you're there, like you're in the upper percentile anyway. So like, just the rest of it is your personal ambition. That's cool. But just stop making it seem like the barrier of entry to everyone, or the barrier of at least making some progress, has to be like all the way up here, because it's not. It's so fucking low that virtually anybody could do it if they just understood that it is really, really low.
Yeah, it's super low. I talked about this the other day on stories where I'm like, I have as much muscle as I could. I have far beyond the amount of muscle. I'm not that muscular, but I have far beyond the amount of muscle I need to maximize the health benefits. I would probably say that, you know, that curve is an upside down U, where like having no muscle is not great. And then for a while, having more muscle makes you healthier. But then after that, it's such a metabolically active tissue that it's probably a downside, right? There's a reason that like, you know, the extreme version of 300-pound bodybuilders don't live that long. And so, I mean, there's other confounders there, but certainly to a point where I'm like, yeah, more muscle is not going to make me healthier. There's a guy, I think Jackson Pios is a super smart dude and all that. But
yeah.
Crack up at Jackson Pios posts. Again, not because it is inherently not good or bad. It doesn't resonate with me personally, because he's always like eating food and making eating food feel like you're a fucking samurai warrior of like this, like, you gotta be, it's like he's some crazy martyr, like going off to battle. I'm like, dude, you're eating rice and chicken in a bowl. Like, I know to be an elite bodybuilder, you need to be in focused, ton of sacrifice. And that's his clientele. So I'm not saying that it doesn't make sense for his clientele. It might, but it's so far removed for me. I watched it post the other day. It's like, just so much of the, you know, lion doesn't convince, you know, doesn't, you know, worry about sheep or whatever the fuck that quote is. It's basically that in a nutshell, like while eating like rice and chicken. And I'm like, it's just not that serious. For me, it's not, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I love Jackson Pierce. Like, I love it. I love his posts. I've watched him for years, but like he's had like a bit of a transition in maybe the last 2 or 3 years, where he's gone like fully in on that kind of like side of things. Again, that could have always been there. He loved these like he's always loved his anime, hasn't he? So it kind of like, there's variables that run through both of those that are very similar, like with what he does now. And it's cool. And like, again, like, you will have your crowd of people that will go with that. And to be honest with you, the information you're giving is great. So even if you came into it as just a general population person, you're still picking up great information, and that's great. But then, like we were saying, like, that's where, and again, like if PTs and coaches are listening to this, like, do you want to coach those people? Like, are those the people that are in your tribe? And if not, you go, well, how are the people that are within my tribe going to understand what I'm talking about? And I'm like, well, I enjoy the people that I work with. And this is one of the tools, or this is one of the tasks that they got us to do when I first started this mentorship, was like, sit down and write out your favorite avatar or your person you're selling to. And I was like, well, I don't really know how to do that. And they went, all right, an easier way of doing it is pick 5 clients that you've had in the past and write down all the attributes of those clients, and then have a look at what the intersection is. I was like, okay, cool, that's a lot easier. So I wrote them all down. And I realized, like, it was people that, yeah, sure, loved getting jacked, loved like taking it seriously enough to make really good progress. But people that would message me and just call me a prick sometimes, and just like give me shit. And I'll be like, these people are like my people, they're the people I enjoy. So then you go, well, hold up a second. Does my content attract those people? You're like, not one bit. And that's where you start to rewrite it and go, oh, okay, cool. This is all making a lot more sense now. I'm appealing to me in my client form.
No, that is a thing that everybody is like, oh, ideal client avatar. Like, what's your ICA? You know, and it's like, it sounds like an annoying thing, like a cliche, many sort of thing, but it is relevant. And that is a situation I'm in, not to make this, but where I love talking about like general health, sometimes general fat loss tips. But that's necessarily like, I'm looking to grow, let's say my hypertrophy group. And I'm like, all right, well, like 75% of your content's not about that. It's like, you need to either reconcile that or accept them. It's not going to be a perfect match, and you need to deal with those consequences. I've recently hired my first sort of like business coach, more of like a social media audit of like, hey, nice. Man, your content sucks, and here's how we make it. And so like, I've always been very resistant to like doing anything other than what felt right for me, and being, I'm going to be driven by myself and what feels right. And if I spend effort changing the way I deliver things, then I will burn out. And that worked for a while. I think I'm very happy with where I am. I'm just like have been blessed on social media. It's been awesome. But there is an element of, okay, the next step is probably is giving into that a little bit. Have you found that some pieces of advice from that mentorship I'd love for you to share, because I know that you are very much yourself. Let's be real. Like, I'm watching your content, I'm like, this is this guy in real life too. He's not like reading off this, like, whatever. Sometimes we script our videos. Of course, you want to kind of
yeah.
It's not like you're reading a teleprompter that someone else wrote or something. So you found, not to put you totally on the spot, what have you found that I know you are you on social media, but what things have you had to, like doing this client avatar kind of practice, have you had to do that you found afterwards? You're like, yeah, that felt not like me at first, but that was a good thing to do.
Yeah, I think, who did I hear talking about this? I think one of the people that I heard talking about this, which, by the way, the mentors that I used is Dan from Biceps and Banter, but they're now Business and Banter. But if you watch their stuff, you'll be like, oh, okay, this makes a lot of sense. They're really, really cool guys. And then I used Sean Casey's social media course the interesting thing with both of those two is that they didn't necessarily, and I don't want this to come across as like I knew all this stuff anyway, because I didn't. The avatar thing completely new to me, but they didn't necessarily tell you any groundbreaking information that was completely new. And again, this is a little bit like making content. You're not going to tell anyone anything that's groundbreaking, that's going to kind of completely change their worldview, but you are going to help to kind of adjust their worldview over time. And what those two people were really good at with me, we're just putting it in really simple terms. So, for example, rather than saying with content, you have to give value, which I heard so many times from so many courses. I've read so many books. I've done so much stuff. And bear in mind, like, I've been doing content for probably the best part of a decade before, and I grew to 5,000 people. And then in 1 year, it's gone up to 700 and whatever. And that's where you're like, oh, okay, cool. So something clicked in that last year. And it's not that you didn't take all the information you knew before and use it, but something clicked with what they said, which was like, give value means when you go through your stuff, would you watch it? No. Okay, cool. So it's too boring. So make it more interesting. You're like, okay, when you go through your stuff, let's say every time that you say something that's a little bit boring or there's nothing kind of going on, that's an opportunity for somebody to scroll. Like, and it takes 2 seconds or it takes half a second to scroll. So you've got probably 2-3 seconds where you can have a little bit of a lapse before there has to be something else going on. And literally all I do is like move things around and have fucking props. Like I've got a dog chew dumbbell as a prop. I think I've spent about 30 quid this year on props, which is just like really simple things. I'm going to get one of those little cube things that you pull apart and it like expands and closes as you go, just because there's a few things I can explain with that. And all I do is I go, okay, cool. That's my content idea that I want to do. I write up a script for it and I'm like, okay, there's my script. Now, this is the boring version of the script where I'll just like write up what's in my brain. Then I'll go through, edit down the script and go, okay, here's where I know that by this stage it's getting a bit drab. So I'm going to put something in. So I do that. And then I sit underneath it and I write out stage cues. Like you treat it the same way. And I think I learned that from a videographer that was talking us through how he did his videos. And I was like, okay, so underneath it, I'll write what I'm going to be doing at that time. So I've got a loose direction. So then when I'm recording, I say the line and I do the thing that's on the stage directions. And I'm like, okay, cool. This all makes sense. And again, it has to sound like you, because otherwise it's going to be fucking weird and people are going to follow you. And then they're going to be like, where the fuck did you go? Because now I'm watching this content. And I've done this many times over the years. Don't think I haven't. Like, I have 100% taken content that was very similar, never really been like a copy person, but very similar to other creators, and then tried to do that. But the problem is when you next week or the next month or 3 months time find another creator that you like and you start doing their content, all the people that followed you because they liked your previous content are going to go, well, no, you're not speaking to me. So you end up never ever growing anyone because you're never speaking to anyone. Whereas if you sit down and always kind of go, well, look, this is an idea, which you could get the idea from someone else, that's fine. And then you go, here's how I'm going to do it. Here's my layout. Here's how I'm going to keep it interesting. You're surprised how easy it can kind of catch on. And to be honest with you, I've been waffling for the last 5 seconds because I forgot the original question. What did you ask for me?
I think you answered it, but the question was like things that at first felt like, I'll give you an example for me. So like businessy, where you're like, ooh, that feels not intuitive to me. That doesn't feel like myself. And so one of those things for me has been like putting in a call to action occasionally when it's or intentionally acknowledging that, like what you said, which was, hey, I have to every 3 to 5 seconds, like I need something to be happening, and then kind of giving this idea that like normally what I would do is I would word vomit the script, and I would word vomit it in a way that I would say it if I were, speaking to a client or whatever. And it would sound like me. I'd read it back. And I realized that, yeah, that's 80% good. But I'm forgetting the fact that there's probably, if I just open up a little bit into something that feels a little bit new for me, and I'm like, hey, use a hook, that's intentional. Use a call to action, intentional. And, whether that's like asking for someone to share it or telling people that I have a program, or like, that to me felt super cringy and has taken me a while to be like, hey, there has to be a balance between, you providing good content, making it entertaining, but some people are going to need a smidge of a nudge. And whether that will, and I've seen, and I hate that the first couple of times I did that, I was like, shit, this kind of worked. And I don't know if you know who Rico was Jordan Syatt's videographer for several years.
What's his name?
Rico Incarnati. And Rico's a man, super great. He was my videographer early on when he was, before he got way too big, where he'd be my videographer. Super smart dude. Turned now does like more of like social media content creation, coaching side of things, and was like, hey, dude, like you put way too many fucking disclaimers. You try and cover so many pieces of context, because that's part of my identity. Is like I want to acknowledge there's a lot of different ways to get from A to Z. I want to acknowledge you don't have to do it this way. You could be, but like if you fucking put 1,000 of those disclaimers in the content, it's like, it's just less fun. You can find, it doesn't mean you have to go all the way to the other end of the spectrum and be super polarizing and it has to be this way. But you can find probably a middle ground. If your goal is to ultimately help the most people, then not putting that in here right now in that amount. And I'm not ever going to stop being that person, because I don't ever want to be hyper polarizing V-shreds or some bullshit. But I'm like, yeah, maybe that goes in the caption, or maybe some of it goes in the caption, or maybe some of it goes in the comments when you have further discussions with people. And it doesn't always have to go every fucking piece of context in the post. And so that was something for me that was uncomfortable first, but I'm realizing, okay, in the pursuit of helping the most people, I'm going to have to shade some of that in.
Do you know what? It's one of the same things. There's was it a podcast, or I think it was a live we went on a little while ago, and I was talking to my friend Josh Taylor about it, who's also got a really good channel. And I was saying to him, his content would do a lot better if he stopped doing caveats for everything that he was saying, because it's so fucking easy, so easy to do. And like, remember, like when I do content, the place that I go for content ideas will be mass. So like mass research review, I'll go into weightology, I'll go into Alan Aragon's. So like my content ideas will come from probably the same place that you do your education, the same place I do them. And I'm like, okay, these will make brilliant content pieces. But if I try and fucking say this entire article here with every single reference point and every single kind of like, if not this, if not that, it's not going to work and it's not going to sell. And then nobody's going to get the information at all. So you're like, okay, so maybe the goal isn't to give people every single bit of knowledge that they need on social media. And again, it's like we were saying at the beginning, there are certain people that are blowing up for terrible information because they don't do that. They give people a camp that they can fall into and they go, yeah, like I just eat meat. Even though now they eat vegetables if it's okay, but I just eat meat. So you can come join my camp of meat eaters. And you're like, okay, brilliant. So we all just eat meat and we can kind of get behind it. And then anything else that comes along for the ride is just within that crowd. And you're like, well, maybe within our space as well. And this is the kind of like change in perspective that I went through, was like, maybe in our space, I can leave these little bits where I go, well, you know, if you do this, then you have to consider this. And if you do this, you have to consider that. And you kind of just trim all that down and you go, well, this is what I'm trying to say to you. Like if I'm talking about protein feedings and I say, anywhere between 3 to 5 protein feedings is going to be great. There seems to be a kind of sweet spot around 4 protein feedings, but if you hit less than that, is there really a big fucking deal? No, probably not. Nothing terrible is going to happen. You'll just end up getting a tiny bit less from it. And that's kind of all you really need to say to people. If people want to argue with that, you can kind of further clarify if you need to. But yeah, you kind of get to a position where you go, well, hold up. I've kind of got to a position where I go, well, if this is reaching 500,000 people, and I'm talking about protein feedings, and it's not exactly the most fun topic in the world, but 500,000 people have managed to hear it. Is that better than me putting in a bunch of, disclaimers to make sure that nobody thinks that I'm slightly wrong?
Yeah. That's exactly. So I'll like batch a bunch of scripts, and then I'll have like Rico and I will sit down, because ultimately what I'd want to get is I want to get inside somebody's head who's watching my content. And there's never been a time where like the biggest every single time we sit down and we look at a script or something, half of it comes out. And that is like, be more concise. It doesn't mean cut all the corners. It doesn't mean go all the way to being polarizing. I'm never going to do that, but it's not a coincidence that every time I go, there's like a bunch of like, hey, don't say this. You don't need this. You don't need this. You don't need that. And that's been really helpful for me. So every time we write a script and we look at it, I'm like, okay, I'm getting closer to this idea of like, still be me, but you don't like you said, if you put every disclaimer, we got 5,000 views. We put less disclaimers, not being polarizing and leaving out helpful context, but trimming the fat a little bit, and we get 500,000 people to view it, then that is a greater net good. I think that can go dark. I think you can go to the dark side of that, where it's like, well, if I say it in a way that is, helpful and true, it's 5,000. If I say it in a way that's fucking crazy, it's 5. Okay, now that's a bad trade. I don't want to do that. But that is a piece of advice I've had to internalize that has been tough, because I am the caveat guy. I'm the disclaimer guy with my one-on-one clients when we spend a fucking hour on Zoom together. But this the time for that,
There's a way that I kind of vet myself that my script is in the place that it needs to be, which is that I have a notes page that I open on my laptop, which is never going to work once I change my screen, but for now it works. I open up to full page, and then I write a line, and once the first page is filled up, so write a line, leave a space, put it in a heading font. Once the whole page is filled up, that's all my lines. I have no more space. I can maybe go 1 or 2 lines below that, but I know that video is going to be about 1 minute 20. And I'm like, man, it's going to start to lose people. So you kind of start taking things out once you're like, okay, this doesn't need to be here. This doesn't need to be here. But like you were saying as well, the bit where you said it can go dark. And I think this is where you have to have like a really good self-awareness as a coach. And I definitely can fall victim to this sometimes. I think definitely 100% in the past, actually, not even maybe, but a little bit less now. And a lot of that's probably an age thing. Just as you get older, you get more comfortable with yourself and everything else. But as a coach, it's very easy to not know why you're doing this. So if you're doing this, like right now, I don't need to do this anymore I still need to carry on doing it, but I don't need to do this anymore to grow an audience. I could probably do what I do now and be absolutely fine for clients for pretty much the rest of your life. Like, it completely changes things. And it's wild to me as well. So it's not for that reason anymore. And then it's very easy as a coach to almost get stuck in the space where you're like trying to grow your audience. And if you're trying to grow your audience, then you're like, well, am I doing that because I want my business to be in a good place? Or am I doing that because I want to be known and I want to be famous and I want to be this and I want to be that? And then I think if you go down that pathway, which again is super easy to do, that's when then it can get into like a bit of a dodgy position, because you're not doing it for any kind of moral reason or anything like that. And you can start to end up producing content that I think on the surface, like, you wouldn't even notice that it's started to be shaped in a certain way, but because that content delivers a feedback to you, which is you get those likes, you get that dopamine hit, you get those views, whatever else, it just becomes a little bit addictive in itself.
It's definitely, I mean, it is the same sort of dopamine reward center, regardless of if your post was really righteous and genuine or if it was just an ab selfie. And then it's I mean, it might feel slightly different, but at the end of the day, you can get hooked on that dopamine for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you, if you see a piece of content of mine where I use a stupid prop that's probably unnecessary, but also keeps it a little, just know that that's your fault. And yeah, just I appreciate that. That has done, whether it's analogies or demonstrations or props or edits on the video.
Mm-hmm.
I have someone that I work with. I'm like, hey, I need like a smidge of pizzazz here. I'm going to say something that I think is smart. It's on me to make it entertaining and not take too long. It's on me to like make sure it's not a zillion caveats. It's on you to add a smidge layer of pizzazz where you're doing that yourself through the use of demonstrations and analogies. I think that we all need to get on board with the fact that maybe we just need to try a smidge harder. And a tweet post is fine sometimes, and the carousel that is fine is totally fine. The show, like, that's all great, but like we probably need to put a smidge more effort into making it entertaining. Do you feel like there's a favorite analogy or demonstration? I know the aspartame one was just a visual of here's how many cans, probably that's percent of what you could eat. But is there one or a couple that stick out in your mind as like, yeah, that one really, like, when I made it, I wasn't sure, but now I really feel like it's stuck with you as something you say or think about a lot?
Just on the point you were saying before, because I've realized now, like, this podcast mostly goes out to other coaches, doesn't it?
No, it does, but there are certainly a lot of them. There's a lot. I'd say it's
perfect
people, but it's okay to have that be the person.
Perfect. The one thing I'd say about like making content as well, where you're saying about like put your thing on it, is that I spend maybe in total it takes me about 3 hours to do a post. So it would take me about an hour to script, hour for idea, hour to script. If it's a big post, it would take me another hour to research. Then it will take me about half hour to film. It doesn't take too long to film, and then it'll take me another hour to edit. And then it might take me like 20, 30 minutes to do like little finishing touches. And the little finishing touches are, people always ask me, they're like, oh, do you have some sort of tracking software that follows you around the room with the camera? And I'm like, no, I do that myself. Like, you do that manually with like a little, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like a little triangle in the bottom corner of the screen, and you can get the camera to follow you as you walk. Like, you have to set the two finishing positions for it. So it takes fucking ages. And then even little things like putting music over the top of the video, I'm like, well, don't just layer music onto it. Layer music so as the bit where you say something, where you then go into something, it hits at the right moment. So I'll line up the video so it takes time, like so the music drops at the right time as when the speaking does. And little things like that, I can't say for definite because I haven't got like an A and B test of like when I haven't done it, when I have. But I'm pretty sure little things like that all add up to something that kind of brings more and more people in and delivers some entertainment to people. So don't underestimate the little things that you can do. In terms of, have I ever said anything that kind of probably, but not for the right reason. So when I first started it, no real kind of like crazy analogies that I've done in terms of with a prop or anything like that, because they're all quite like visual based, and I think that's where a lot of my audience kind of lies. Like, they're very visually driven people, and then the information kind of comes along with it. It's a little bit like me. Like, I'm like a little ADHD child that sort of like loves reading, so I've kind of forced myself into that bracket of reading shit. But if somebody sat there and just demonstrated it the way I did, and I think that's why I always quite liked Mike Israel, because he's very entertaining when he delivers information. But if they delivered it that way, I think I'd have learned a lot easier. So I was like, okay, cool, I'm going to come in and do that sort of stuff. But the thing that people do say to me, and this is the wild thing, I went to Cornwall the other day, which is a tiny little bit of England, like just this little pretty countryside bit. And there was, bear in mind, this is like a remote-ish part of England, little villages, there's not that many people. There's like 10 people that come up and said hello to you. And you're like, they follow you on social media, and you're like, this is wild. And like, one of the things that people used to say to me was, you're the guy that says, now if you find yourself in the gym, because all of my beginning content used to have that on it. That was like literally the start of everything. And then the end of it used to be, now go grow some muscle, or now go do this, or whatever. It was kind of like wrapped up in the video. And again, if like for PTs listening, like, don't copy that. If anything, I'd say that actually was like a negative thing for me, because I tried to keep making content that made sense for that. and it wasn't actually delivering anything in return. If anything, it was just kind of keeping me on rails. And if anything, new people that came in was almost like, why the fuck are you saying like now if you find yourself at the start of everything, it doesn't really make any sense anymore. But I've seen a few PTs like doing the same sort of like their own same thing at the beginning of every post. And you're like, you don't need to, it's not giving you anything.
Yeah. That's great. And you know, it's definitely been inspiring for me. So definitely like you have a new style of content that's like, oh yeah, like this is someone doing something slightly differently and doing well, which is great for all of us to see and learn from. And definitely just gonna go with some weird ball that opens up and closes as like a
you see you still
you know, like
if you get the ball first, I'll be well guided.
Dude, America, man, Amazon, dude, shit's here. I'll get it here. Hey, dude,
I'm gonna call you out on my stories immediately after this.
Hey, hey, man. No, I'm just kidding.
We start some internet beef.
All right, man.
That's how we get that. That's how we really get big. Anyway, just if you really want to get big on Instagram or social medias, just start some beef with people, mate. Just you'll be fine.
Catch me in your comment section. Totally. Yeah. Shit, man. All right. I appreciate your time. You've just super helpful. It's good to see you. It's good to see you and meet you and chat with you. You've been you just been a breath of fresh air on social media. It's been great to see you. It's like, man, I could like whatever, learn a thing or two. And that's been really, really great. And so yeah, man, give people a shout. I mean, people don't follow you. They're living under a fucking rock these days, but give people a shout where they can find you, where you do thing.
So is I can't even remember my fucking handle. Steve.craft coaching, I think. This is how bad I am with socials. This is why I'm surprised I ever kicked off. Steve.craft coaching. Everyone always thinks my name's Steve Craft. It's actually Steve King, but that's fine. Don't mind being called Steve Craft. That's fine. And then I am soon to be starting a YouTube, which has been the interesting bit. I'm like, how do I take this short form content? Because obviously you can post that on Reels, but how do I take the short form?
Don't edit it
into a long form. It's just leave all the nonsense in. Yeah. But that's going to be the next step, hopefully.
Yeah, that'll be fun. It'd be different for you. Because that is a lot of times where I'm like I'll sit with Rico and he's like, yeah, this is a piece of YouTube content. This isn't an Instagram post. Like this is slightly different. Like where you're like, hey, we have, you won't have to have that same mentality of like every 2 seconds, like panicking that someone's going to swipe away. You still have that a little bit, but on a larger scale. So there's a little less pressure to do that, but pressure to do other things because it's just a different platform, different challenges.
But that's again like where you remember what the audience is there for. Like nobody's on Instagram to get fitness information and to get educated. Like some people are. It's very rare. But if you really want an education, you go over to YouTube. So you go, okay, Instagram, entertainment, education, entertainment first, education afterwards. Either YouTube, you can probably kind of flip that on its head and you go, okay, cool. Now I can give more information, a bit less education. Some of the people that are brilliant to watch, by the way, because I always get ideas from just other people. Like the reason that I use classical music over my videos is because there's a cooking channel that I watch and they do these like awesome cooking edits and they've all got classical music over the top. And I was like, that's sick.
Hold on. I know exactly what you're talking about. I love this guy. Kills it with the I think like whatever.
I can't remember his fucking name. But yeah, great, like super entertaining.
Yeah.
What did you say? Every time I talk, it cuts out your voice. So what did you say?
He's always got classical music on. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So like you can kind of like take ideas from other places and be like, okay, cool, yeah, I could definitely use something here. I could see how this could apply. And YouTube, I've been doing it with a lot of, believe it or not, like what they called like economists, people that do like financial advice as well, because they deliver it. Some of the channels, not all of them, but some of the channels deliver it in a really interesting way. And you're like, okay. And I'm not seeing anybody do this in the fitness space because a lot of fitness people, I think sometimes fitness people get a little bit stuck in their ways and they're like, oh, when articles stop being as popular and everyone was like, well, why are articles not as popular? And now people are on YouTube watching videos that are like 15 minutes long and like, oh, this is terrible. It's going to ruin everybody. And you're like, well, it didn't. And everybody's fine. And arguably everybody's probably more educated now than they were with, probably some misinformation, but they are more educated. And you're like, this is just the next step in that. You just have to kind of keep up with it.
Yeah. What's your YouTube?
I don't actually know, but it'll be the same. It'll be like Steve King.
You're not up and running.
It's there, but there's nothing on it. It's like a few form videos for clients. Is about it.
Don't go yet. You're not. It's not dressed up yet. I got it.
There's nothing there for you. I'm literally the worst social media person in the world. I just like talking shit.
Oh shit. All right, man. All right. It's a pleasure having you on, man. We will I'll link all your shit and whatever. I'm sure people know you by now, but I appreciate your time, dude.
Thank you, brother. It's been great being here.